Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. It was just another quiet afternoon in a Michigan mobile home park until a 911 call changed everything. Inside one of the homes, paramedics found 6-year-old Giovanni Jennings lying unresponsive. His tiny body was covered in bruises, and something was terribly wrong. As investigators dug deeper into what happened, they discovered a heartbreaking story of abuse and pain that no child should ever endure. Who let this happen? And why didn't anyone step in to help him before it was too late? This is the story of a little boy who deserved a safe and loving home, and the fight to bring those responsible to justice. On October 17, 2017, Giovanni Jennings was born in Detroit, Michigan, to his mother, Elena Jennings. Giovanni, affectionately called Chula by his family, a term meaning cute or cool, was a lively child with big brown eyes, long lashes, and a bright smile that revealed adorable dimples on both cheeks. Elena often referred to him as "little man," calling him her handsome baby boy. From an early age, Giovanni displayed an independent and playful spirit. Even before he could walk, he entertained his family by making silly faces and sticking out his tongue when Elena tried to take pictures. As he grew, his personality blossomed. A memorable photo from when he was just 10 months old showed him filling up a baby pool with a garden hose on a hot day. Elena captioned it proudly, "Little man is already filling up his pool without mama's help. He sure is too big for 10 months." His family described him as an amazing child who loved to run and play. In a heartwarming video, they captured Giovanni and his brother laughing as they attempted to repeat words like taco, chimichanga, and chalupa. Their giggles and the happiness shared between them painted a picture of a joyful family life. Elena, who became a mother at 18, often reflected on her journey in heartfelt social media posts. In June 2017, she shared how she had worked hard to turn her life around, crediting her brother for helping her escape a difficult past. She wrote about embracing her role as a mother and focusing on creating a better future for her children. By 2019, Elena had welcomed another son, and photos from 2020 showed Giovanni as a loving older brother, cuddling and playing with him. Despite facing challenges, Elena remained committed to being a dedicated mother, often sharing her pride and love for her children. In the years that followed, Elena began a relationship with Esteban, and the family moved into a home in southwest Detroit. Esteban treated Giovanni and his brother like his own sons, and the couple eventually had a daughter together in 2022. However, their relationship became strained over time, and in March 2024, Elena moved out with her children. Shortly after, Elena entered a relationship with Daniel Giacchina. Daniel had faced his own struggles, including legal troubles and personal hardships. In late 2023, he, Elena, her 3 children, and his grandmother Anne experienced a devastating house fire that left them homeless. Anne sought help through a GoFundMe campaign, writing, "My name is Anne. I'm 74 and this devastates me. Our house burned down 2 weeks ago and we had no rental insurance. We're having such a hard time keeping a roof over our heads, paying for the motel and supporting the animals we rescued from the fire, one of whom gave birth to puppies shortly after the incident. It's so cold and we've lost everything. Any donations would mean the world to us. God bless you all. I know there's a light at the end of this tunnel. Despite her plea, donations were scarce. They managed to raise only $275, far from enough to cover even a week at the motel, which charged $350 weekly. Daniel tried to negotiate with the motel owner, but the situation remained tense. A series of texts from the owner highlighted his frustration, emphasizing the need for timely payments and compliance with motel rules. The owner's patience was wearing thin, and Daniel's updates on the campaign reflected growing desperation. Sometime after, Elena ended their relationship. She found housing for herself and the kids, leaving Daniel and Anne behind. In an emotional update, Daniel shared his heartbreak. When this all started, it was our whole family, me, my partner, her kids, and my grandmother. After the fire, Elena moved on, found a house, and left me and Grandma here. I feel used. We were planning a future, starting businesses and talking about marriage. Now I've lost the woman I loved, her kids, and everything else. The challenges of homelessness weighed heavily on both Daniel and Anne. Despite their circumstances, Daniel's posts also shed light on the broader crisis of homelessness, acknowledging how close many people are to losing their homes due to unforeseen events like fires or financial setbacks. Eventually, Anne and Daniel were able to secure housing at the ACL Mobile Home Park on DeQuindra Road in southeast Michigan. Months later, Elena and her children moved into the mobile home with them, attempting to rebuild their lives together. However, tensions began to rise and Giovanni, one of Elena's children, reportedly struggled to adjust. Family dynamics became strained, and disciplinary measures were sometimes taken when Giovanni misbehaved. When asked about the treatment Giovanni received, Elena initially claimed it was disciplinary, a method she and Daniel referred to as the corner. The corner wasn't just a spot for a typical timeout. In their shared bedroom, they set aside an area specifically for punishing Giovanni. They barricaded him in with makeshift walls and covered the space with a black curtain, effectively isolating him from the rest of the room. To monitor him, Daniel allegedly installed a security camera aimed directly at the corner, allowing him and Elena to watch the child remotely through their phones. This punishment went far beyond standard discipline. While a typical timeout might last a minute per year of age, 6 minutes for a 6-year-old like Giovanni, evidence revealed he was confined for far longer. He was forced to sleep in the corner on a narrow wooden plank, just 11 inches wide and 3 feet long, with no mattress or blanket. Giovanni wasn't allowed to move, look out the window, or even leave the corner for basic needs without facing further punishment. While Elena went to work, Daniel was left in charge of the children, including Giovanni and his younger brother. Rather than ensuring their safety, Daniel reportedly encouraged dangerous behavior, allowing the children to handle a gun and ammunition. Disturbing photos showed the children pointing the gun at each other while Daniel looked on. In one chilling image, the laser scope illuminated a child's raised hand. Daniel's violent tendencies weren't limited to encouraging reckless play. Giovanni's younger brother claimed Daniel had shot him in the leg with a BB gun and also targeted Giovanni. Police later found holes in the walls of the corner, with BBs still embedded in them, supporting these allegations. On July 26th, Giovanni committed the offense of looking out the window. Daniel reportedly responded by stapling Giovanni's shirt to the wall with a staple gun, pinning the boy's shoulders in place and forcing his face into the corner. He texted Elena a photo of Giovanni stapled to the wall, apparently amused by the scene. The following day, Daniel allegedly punched Giovanni in the stomach 3 times, causing the boy to vomit. Over the next 3 days, Giovanni's condition deteriorated. Elena later admitted to police that she knew he needed medical attention but avoided taking him to the hospital, fearing that doctors would see his injuries and report them. On July 30th at around 2:30 p.m., Elena finally called 911 when Giovanni stopped breathing. Paramedics arrived at the home to find him unresponsive, covered in cuts and bruises. They managed to restart his breathing and rushed him to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe. Giovanni was transferred to the Children's Hospital of Michigan's Stilson Specialty Center, where his stepfather Esteban came to see him. Esteban described Giovanni as unrecognizable, with a swollen head and bruised, disfigured face. Giovanni clung to life for several hours, but around midnight on July 31st, he succumbed to his injuries. Esteban later wrote a heart-wrenching post online. "My heart is completely shattered right now. There are no words to describe the pain of losing a child. My son died in my arms last night. His mom and her new boyfriend beat my 6-year-old son to death. My heart is broken into a million pieces. How can someone do that to a child, especially his own mother? I hope you rot in hell." When questioned by police, Elena claimed she had left Giovanni with a babysitter that day and suggested this person must have harmed him. Daniel echoed her story, denying any responsibility. However, the evidence told a different, tragic story of systematic abuse and neglect that ultimately led to Giovanni's death. Initial reports suggested that Giovanni's biological father was being implicated in the abuse, but no names were released to the public. Investigators soon cleared him of any involvement after uncovering evidence that he had not been near Giovanni at the time of the injuries. Instead, Giovanni's younger brother provided critical information during an interview at Care House, a child advocacy center specializing in forensic interviews and therapy for victims of abuse. The 4-year-old told his interviewer, "Chulo died all day and Danny was there," shedding light on what really happened. With this new evidence, police cleared the first suspect and turned their attention to Giovanni's mother, Elena Jennings, and her boyfriend, Daniel. It became clear that the couple had conspired to mislead authorities. Both were arrested and charged with lying to police, a felony that carries a potential 2-year prison sentence. Daniel was also charged with felony possession of firearms and ammunition, as his previous convictions barred him from owning weapons. Under questioning, Elena admitted that she had witnessed Daniel punch Giovanni in the stomach 3 days before his death. This violent act caused a perforation in Giovanni's bowel, allowing intestinal contents to leak into his body and triggering a massive, fatal infection. Medical intervention might have saved his life, but Elena chose not to seek help, fearing that the boy's injuries would expose the abuse. Oakland County prosecutor Karen McDonald announced that the case against Elena and Daniel was one of the most horrifying her office had ever handled. After a painstaking review of digital evidence, including photos, videos, text messages, and social media chats, prosecutors discovered a chilling pattern of abuse. Both Elena and Daniel had allegedly watched video clips of Giovanni's confinement in the corner and even laughed at images of the boy being stapled to the wall by his clothing. McDonald stated that the evidence showed Elena not only allowed the abuse, but at times encouraged it. On August 9, 2024, Elena and Daniel were charged with first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse, both of which carry potential life sentences. They were denied bail and remain in custody at the Oakland County Jail. At a press conference, McDonald outlined the harrowing details of the case. Giovanni, affectionately known as Chulo, endured prolonged abuse in a makeshift pen in the couple's bedroom. He was frequently beaten, denied food, and forced to sleep on a narrow wooden plank. The physical and emotional torment he suffered was evident in the forensic evidence. An autopsy revealed that Giovanni was malnourished, significantly underweight, and covered in bruises and cuts. His abdomen was swollen and distended from the internal injuries that ultimately caused his death. The medical examiner documented injuries to Giovanni's scalp, face, lips, shoulders, back, thighs, and legs, as well as a BB gun wound on his shin. These findings painted a horrifying picture of the systematic abuse he endured. Prosecutor McDonald described the case as one of the worst her team had encountered, emphasizing that Giovanni's death was not quick, but a slow and agonizing process. Prosecutor Karen McDonald emphasized the importance of safeguarding children during her statements about the tragic death of 6-year-old Giovanni Chulo Jennings. "All children have the right to grow up in a home free of fear," she stated. "This child and his siblings suffered unimaginably and lived in fear every day." She pledged that her office and the Madison Heights Police Department would use every available resource to seek justice for Giovanni and hold those responsible for his death accountable. When asked how the public could help prevent such tragedies, McDonald urged vigilance and action. "We need to keep track of our children, especially those in public schools, and inquire if they are suddenly withdrawn. Whether you're a neighbor, teacher, coach, or just someone in line at the grocery store, if something concerns you, report it to Child Protective Services or the police." Elena's defense attorney released a statement urging the public to remember her client's presumption of innocence until proven guilty. He expressed sympathy for those affected by the tragedy, but refrained from commenting further, citing the ongoing investigation. The case has left the small community in the ACL Mobile Home Park shocked and heartbroken. Neighbor Jolene Zidlowski recounted how Daniel's grandmother Ann once confided in her about a severe beating Giovanni endured. "She told me Elena had paddled him after he got out of the shower. I was devastated. It was heartbreaking. You could see the welts all over his arms, legs, and buttocks." The tragedy has yet to prompt public memorials or vigils. David has not made a public statement but may deliver an impact statement at the trial. A private service for Giovanni was held on August 14, 2024. Giovanni's stepfather, Esteban Cabrera, remains devastated by the loss. He recounted how, after his separation from Elena, she frequently denied him access to the children, including his biological daughter. When he did see them, he suspected something was wrong and contacted Child Protective Services months before Giovanni's death, reporting medical neglect and abuse. They took no action. Esteban now has custody of his daughter and is committed to ensuring Giovanni's younger brother remains connected to his family. However, legal complications have placed the boy in foster care temporarily. On August 1st, Esteban posted an update online. "I appreciate all the support from each and every one of you. This has been completely devastating. I now have custody of my biological daughter, but due to my legal status in the U.S., Giovanni's brother has been placed in foster care. His uncle is working with CPS to bring him into his care, but for now, he is not with me. He will still have visitations with his sister twice a week. I'm also working on setting up a GoFundMe to help with funeral expenses. Unfortunately, his mother still has legal rights over his body, and I may not be able to have a ceremony with his ashes. His body is still undergoing examination due to the extreme nature of this case. Thank you for your continued support." Though a GoFundMe campaign had not been posted as of this writing, community members expressed eagerness to contribute once available. Meanwhile, Giovanni's grandmother shared her grief on his tribute page. "Hello, I'm the grandma of Chulo, whom he called Mimi. I'm at a loss for words. I've been through everything with you since birth. Rest in peace, my precious grandson. You will be forever in my heart. I love you. I know you're in heaven now. Until I see you again, love, Mimi. The heartbreak surrounding Giovanni's death has rippled through his family and community, leaving loved ones searching for ways to grieve while fighting for justice for a little boy whose life was cut tragically short. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a quiet evening in Riverside, California, just another night in a peaceful neighborhood. Justin Hilbert kissed his son goodnight, said goodbye to his partner Tanya, and walked out the door. But something was waiting for him outside, a plan in motion that would end his life in the blink of an eye. As hours passed and Justin failed to return, Tanya's worry turned to fear. A message sent from his phone was the only sign she had. Two chilling words: "It's over." If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Tanya Rep was born in the mid-1980s in California. She grew up in a stable, hard-working household, and from an early age, she displayed a sense of independence, responsibility, and a strong ambition to carve her own path. Tanya pursued a career in logistics, where she earned a reputation for her organizational skills and unwavering reliability. Her professional life was characterized by a deep sense of commitment, and it was clear that she had a bright future ahead of her. In the 2000s, Tanya met Jared Bischoff, a former U.S. Marine. Jared seemed like the ideal partner: mature, dependable, and strong. Their relationship moved quickly, and it wasn't long before they were married. At first, things seemed promising, but soon cracks began to appear in their marriage. As time passed, tensions between them grew, and power struggles became more frequent. Jared's behavior became increasingly controlling and aggressive, his jealousy and emotional manipulation taking a toll on Tanya. Eventually, his physical aggression escalated, but Tanya refused to accept such treatment. Determined to reclaim her life, Tanya began gathering evidence in preparation for a divorce. The process was long and painful. Jared, however, was unwilling to let go. He resisted the separation and fought to maintain control over her, using any means necessary to keep her in his grasp. His obsession with maintaining influence over her life persisted even after their divorce. Tanya's attempt to move on was met with constant interference from Jared. Though he claimed to have come to terms with their split, he couldn't bear the idea of Tanya being with someone else. Jared's behavior intensified when Tanya began seeing another man. He tried to convince himself that he had accepted the situation, but his actions told a different story. He showed up near her home, monitored her every move, and made threats to keep her in check. In contrast, Tanya's new partner, Justin Hilbert, lived a quiet, steady life. Born in 1988, Justin had grown up in Riverside, California, and after a series of side gigs, he found stability in a full-time job maintaining industrial equipment. He was calm, reserved, and conflict-averse, with a desire to build a simple, steady life. In early 2015, he met Tanya, who was still dealing with the aftermath of her tumultuous marriage. Their connection was natural, and Justin didn't push for anything too fast. He simply offered support, quietly being there for her when she needed him. Over time, their bond grew, and they became a couple. By the time Tanya found out she was pregnant, their relationship had become solid. Justin was undeterred by the news. Instead, he embraced it with calm resolve. The two settled into a life together, preparing for the arrival of their child. Early in 2016, their son, Logan, was born. Justin immediately stepped into fatherhood, eager to learn how to care for his son, swaddling, bottle feeding, and waking up for late-night feedings. Meanwhile, there was Bailey Sharp, the youngest person in this story. Bailey, born in the early 1990s in Seattle, came from a law enforcement family and had a bright future ahead of her. However, everything changed in her teens when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and lupus. Chronic pain, medical restrictions, and the toll on her mental health led her down a difficult path. She began using marijuana, then turned to prescription painkillers, and eventually stronger substances. After several stints in rehab and periods of recovery, Bailey decided to leave Seattle in search of a fresh start in California. By 2015, she had few social ties left, and her family relationships had deteriorated. In California, she struggled with unstable housing and finding steady work. It was in this vulnerable state that she met Jared Bischoff. Jared's involvement in Bailey's life was not about romance, but about exerting dominance and control. He saw her vulnerability as an opportunity to manipulate and influence her for his own purposes. On June 20th, 2016, everything changed. It was an ordinary day in Riverside, California. Tanya, Justin, and their 6-month-old son, Logan, spent the day together, discussing their weekly plans and enjoying their time as a family. But things took an unexpected turn when Tanya received a strange message from a woman named Bailey Sharp. The message accused Justin of living a double life and being dishonest. Tanya showed Justin the message, and he immediately dismissed it as false, assuring her that someone was trying to drive a wedge between them. Calm but firm, Justin reassured Tanya that he loved her and had nothing to hide. He promised to get to the bottom of who was behind the accusation. Later that evening, Justin left the house. It was not unusual for him to run errands or pick up tools, and Tanya thought little of it. However, hours passed, and Justin did not return. Tanya tried calling and texting him, but there was no response. By midnight, his phone was turned off. Worry set in, and Tanya stayed up, hoping to hear from him. But as the night wore on, she was left in the dark, unsure of where he was or what had happened. On the morning of June 21st, 2016, Tanya received a chilling text message from Justin's phone, one that seemed out of place, short and impersonal. "Don't wait. It's over." There was no greeting, no explanation, just cold words that felt foreign. It was not how Justin spoke. Tanya immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. She texted his mother and called his sister, hoping for any word on Justin's whereabouts, but no one knew where he was. It became clear that Justin was missing. Around the same time, Riverside County authorities received a report from a man on a motorcycle who was riding down a rural road near Lake Matthews. The man spotted a body lying face up on the shoulder, clothes soaked in blood. There were no signs of a struggle. The medical examiner later confirmed that the man was Justin and had died from a gunshot to the head, but there were knife wounds before the fatal shot. Evidence suggested that Justin had been attacked elsewhere before being dumped in that spot. Investigators began their work immediately. Based on the condition of the body, they believed the crime had occurred the night before. After confirming Justin's identity, officers went to the home he shared with Tanya. She confirmed that Justin had left around 9 p.m. the previous night and never returned. His car, a dark blue sedan, was also missing, and it was quickly entered into the National Missing Vehicle Database. As investigators continued to process the scene, they noted that several of Justin's personal items were missing, including his phone, work badge, and wallet. He never left without them, which suggested that someone had deliberately tried to erase any trace of him. But tiny fibers and microparticles on Justin's body pointed to a different location. Subsequent investigation confirmed that Justin had been transported and discarded after his death. Speaking with Justin's friends and co-workers provided no concrete leads. No one knew of any conflict or threats against him. All who knew him described him as calm and non-confrontational, with no debts or legal issues. There was no obvious motive for his murder. However, the case took a turn when investigators examined Tanya's recent messages. One name stood out: Bailey Sharp. Bailey had contacted Tanya just before Justin's disappearance, and a record search revealed that Bailey had no fixed address, a criminal history related to illegal substances, and a history of instability. This led authorities to focus on her as a primary lead. They traced Bailey's movements and found that she had no official job, no insurance, no vehicle, and no driver's license. The only connection they had was the phone number she used to contact Tanya. A request to the phone carrier revealed that the SIM card was registered under someone else's name and used sporadically. Further investigation into the phone number revealed frequent connections to a man named Jared Bischoff, Tanya's ex-husband. Although this didn't provide concrete evidence of collaboration between Bailey and Jared, it raised suspicions. As the investigation continued, authorities began tracking Bailey's associates. Social workers reported seeing her in parking lots and bars with various men, but the identities of these individuals remained unknown. The focus shifted to digital records. A check of the IP address Bailey used to log into her social media accounts revealed that the same device and IP address had been used to access an account associated with Jared Bischoff. The connection between Bailey and Jared became increasingly clear, though the exact nature of their relationship was still uncertain. Investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that Jared didn't know about the messages sent from Bailey's phone, but everything pointed to a coordinated effort. They decided to continue surveillance on Bailey and Jared, tracking their movements without alerting the suspects. It wasn't until later that investigators discovered the most chilling detail. The text Tanya received from Justin's phone that morning was not sent by Justin at all. By that time, Justin had already been killed. His phone was in Bailey's possession. She had deliberately sent the message, intending to buy time and keep Tanya from contacting authorities too soon. Once law enforcement began actively searching for Bailey Sharp, they quickly realized that her whereabouts were elusive. Her phone was turned off, and there was no activity on her social media or messaging accounts. The only lead came from surveillance footage at a pharmacy. On the evening of June 22nd, roughly 24 hours after Justin's body was discovered, Bailey was caught on camera. She was alone, wearing a medical mask and a hooded sweatshirt. Bailey bought pain relievers and bottled water. When she paid at the counter, she presented an ID that did not match her own name. The clerk didn't remember many details, but the cameras captured everything. After that, Bailey disappeared again. As a result, Bailey was officially declared a wanted person. An alert was quickly sent out across local law enforcement agencies, and her photo, known aliases, descriptions, and connections were entered into the system. As investigators dug deeper, they noticed a pattern. In the weeks leading up to Justin's death, Bailey had been spotted several times in southern Riverside, particularly near a remote residential complex. Surveillance footage in the area showed her vehicle, followed by another car registered under a man's name. At this point, authorities had yet to release the name, but it was becoming increasingly clear. Either Bailey was aware that law enforcement was searching for her, or someone was helping her stay hidden. But then a bigger question remained. If Bailey was just a pawn in this case, who was really pulling the strings? Who had planned this entire scheme? The answer began to take shape on the morning of June 24th when the Department of Motor Vehicles responded to an inquiry about a second vehicle frequently seen near Bailey. This car was registered to none other than Jared Bischoff, Tanya's ex-husband. Until that moment, police had no reason to believe Jared was involved in Justin's disappearance. But now, with his vehicle appearing near the main suspect, Bailey, the investigation took a sharp turn. After his divorce from Tanya, Jared had stayed with relatives briefly before moving out. According to Tanya's close friends, communication between them had ceased after several arguments, controlling behavior, and emotional tension. Tanya believed Jared was dangerous, though there were no official police reports filed against him. Investigators learned that Tanya had once discussed installing a security system because she feared her ex-husband. After their split, Jared seemed to disappear from the radar. No one knew exactly where he was living or who he was spending time with. That is, until Bailey re-entered the picture. Investigators learned that Bailey had been frequenting southern Riverside for several weeks before Justin's death. Surveillance footage showed her with a man whose face was partially visible but bore a striking resemblance to Jared. The connection was soon confirmed. With this new information, police secured a warrant to search an apartment Jared appeared to be using based on the mobile activity. The apartment was rented under a false name. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Leftover food, Bailey's clothing, a backpack, and a knife wrapped in a t-shirt. Forensic tests later revealed that the blade contained traces of blood, which was confirmed to belong to Justin Hilbert. However, Jared was no longer there. Witnesses reported seeing him shortly before the incident, sometimes alone and sometimes with a woman resembling Bailey. After that, both Jared and Bailey vanished. With warrants now issued for both suspects, the investigation expanded to include banks, phone carriers, and traffic cameras. A bartender named Ricky remembered Bailey clearly. She had been there with a man, tall, with an upright posture, and quiet. At the time, he hadn't known the man's name, but when shown a photo of Jared, Ricky immediately recognized him. Ricky recalled overhearing parts of their conversation, including phrases like, "She ruined everything," and "He won't be around much longer." This provided a potential motive. Jared wanted Justin out of the picture to regain control over Tanya. It seemed that the original target may have been Tanya, but Justin's involvement had set the entire plan in motion. Using Bailey, Jared had orchestrated a setup. She sent Tanya misleading messages accusing Justin of infidelity, hoping to sow doubt and create conflict. The goal was to drive a wedge between them, possibly pushing Justin away from Tanya. On the evening of June 20th, Justin left the house after receiving those messages from Bailey. He was lured into a confrontation with someone he thought he could trust, unaware he was walking straight into a trap. Tragically, no one would see him alive again. Days later, investigators discovered Justin's car, a dark blue sedan, abandoned on a remote roadside. Inside the car were bloodstains on the seat and a partial fingerprint on the exterior, further evidence that something terrible had occurred. Each new discovery raised more questions. The investigation took a crucial turn when authorities linked a sub-analysis to Danny Serrano, a man with prior convictions for assault and theft. At the time, Danny was already in custody on an unrelated charge. However, it was confirmed that during Justin's disappearance, Danny had still been free. Investigators interviewed him while he was in the detention center, but his statements were inconsistent. He denied involvement, though his responses raised suspicions. The police then brought Danny's photo to bartender Ricky, who had previously seen Bailey Sharp at a bar. When Ricky saw Danny's image, he immediately recognized him. Ricky recalled seeing Bailey with another man who was nervous and edgy, Danny. He remembered that Danny hadn't been drinking much, had changed clothes in the restroom, and had thrown something in the trash. Before leaving, Danny reportedly told Ricky, "You didn't see anything. That's why you're still breathing." At the time, Ricky had dismissed the comment as a joke, but in hindsight, he realized he had encountered someone directly tied to the case. Ricky's account added weight to investigators' suspicions. There was a third person involved. Justin's phone was discovered in a dumpster near where his car had been abandoned. Though the phone was damaged, forensic specialists managed to recover the call logs and text history. The text confirmed that in the final hours of Justin's life, he received messages from Bailey's phone and a subsequent phone call that prompted him to leave home. This new evidence helped reconstruct the chain of events leading up to his murder. Meanwhile, a small motel in Arizona caught the attention of investigators. In early July, a man and woman matching the descriptions of Jared and Bailey had stayed there. The motel manager recalled that they had been quiet, paid in cash, and requested not to be disturbed. After their departure, the manager mentioned that the shower had been scrubbed thoroughly, but micro traces of blood were found in the drain. On July 23rd, in a remote desert area near an abandoned hangar, the body of a woman was discovered. The woman was later identified as Bailey Sharp. The cause of death was determined to be multiple stab wounds, but there were no belongings, ID, or phone found with her. Moreover, fingerprints belonging to Jared were discovered on a plastic bag near the dump site where Bailey's body was found. After their stay at the motel, it became clear that Bailey had been eliminated. Jared had ensured that there would be no loose ends to tie him to the crime. With mounting evidence against him, authorities were certain that Jared had removed a partner who might have turned on him, making him the sole suspect in both murders. On July 27th, a tip came in from a roadside diner in Arizona. A man resembling Jared had eaten alone, paid in cash, and left. Surveillance footage confirmed it was him. 3 days later, on July 30th, in New Mexico, a patrol unit stopped a car with a broken tail light. The driver, visibly nervous and carrying fake identification, was later confirmed to be Jared Bischoff. He was arrested. When authorities searched his vehicle, they found only cash, forged documents, and a backpack with clothes. Jared remained calm and silent during questioning, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Blood traces matching Bailey's were found in the motel, and the apartment linked to him contained a knife with Justin's blood on it. Forensic experts confirmed that the blood on the knife matched blood found in Justin's car where the crime had occurred. Moreover, Jared's DNA was found on the steering wheel and driver's seat of the vehicle, confirming he had driven the car after the murder. The final breakthrough came with Danny Serrano's confession. During a second interview, fearing a life sentence, Danny agreed to cooperate. He revealed that Jared had been the one to use the knife and fire the fatal shot. Danny admitted he had helped restrain Justin and later helped dispose of the body. His story aligned with digital evidence, physical findings, and the established timeline. Investigators also discovered that some of the messages sent to Tanya from Bailey's phone had been written by a man. Forensic linguists confirmed that these texts had been crafted by Jared, confirming what the data had suggested all along. Bailey and Jared had acted in coordination, with Jared as the mastermind and direct perpetrator behind the crime. In the spring of 2017, the trial began. The charges included first-degree murder of Justin Hilbert, the death of Bailey Sharp, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. The jury found Jared Bischoff guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, and his attorney declined to file an appeal. Initially, Jared had planned to target both Tanya and Justin, but according to Danny, the plan evolved. Jared allegedly said that physical death was too quick for his ex-wife. He believed that the real suffering would come from leaving her alive, forcing her to face a life without the person she loved. Jared wanted Tanya to endure the pain of raising her child while constantly reminded of the horrors that had unfolded. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a Wednesday night in Georgia. Teresa had just visited her sister, full of excitement about her new apartment and the fresh start she'd been waiting for. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place. Around 10:30 p.m., she made one last call to a friend. Teresa said she was heading back to the house she still shared with her soon-to-be ex-husband, just to pick up a few more things. She planned to wait until he was asleep to avoid any trouble. But after that, no one ever heard from her again. Her phone went quiet, her car showed up in a strange place, and the man she was trying to get away from? He had a story, but something about it just didn't feel right. What really happened that night would take years to uncover, and the truth was far more disturbing than anyone imagined. This is the story of Teresa Parker. Teresa Fielding was born on September 9, 1965, in San Diego County, California. The daughter of Claire and William Fielding, she grew up in a bustling household alongside her 4 siblings, Hilda, Jerry, Richard, and the youngest, Christina. From the earliest years, Teresa shared a uniquely close bond with Christina, a connection that remained unwavering throughout her life. But her loyalty wasn't limited to just one sibling. Family, in every form, was always at the core of who she was. As an adult, Teresa was known for her warmth and easygoing nature. Her kindness left a lasting impression, and that empathy guided her into public service. She found work as a police dispatcher in Lafayette, Louisiana, where she thrived in the fast-paced environment. Conveniently, Christina and her family had also moved to the area, allowing the sisters to stay in constant touch, something they both cherished deeply. Teresa's talent and dedication eventually led her to a new role. In September 1992, she was appointed supervisor of the Emergency Services Center in Walker County, Georgia. It may have been around this time that her life intersected with that of Samuel Logan Parker, a local police officer born around 1956 and raised in Walker County. Samuel grew up exploring the woods and fishing with his brother Kenneth, who would later follow him into both the military and law enforcement. To those close to him, Samuel's identity was inseparable from his badge. He was a man who lived for the job and rarely allowed anything else to interfere. But behind his professional image, a darker side lingered. In the 1980s, Samuel married a woman named Kayla Burrell. By 1989, during his second stint with the Lafayette Police Department, Kayla confided in friends that her husband had physically assaulted her while in uniform. One of those friends happened to be married to City Councilman Max Morrison, who brought the disturbing allegations to Police Chief Dino Richardson and City Manager David Ulrich. Nothing came of it. Samuel was never questioned. The violence continued. Kayla endured another terrifying incident when she confronted Samuel about a simple interaction he'd had with a store clerk. His reaction was explosive. He dragged her by the hair through broken glass and handcuffed her to a bedpost. Eventually, Kayla found the strength to leave him. But even after separating, Samuel's aggression escalated. He broke into her new home using a master key, pinned her down on a couch, and pressed his service revolver to her head. He threatened her life and swore no one would ever find her body if she told anyone what had happened. Despite this chilling history, Samuel eventually began courting Teresa, who by all accounts had no idea about his violent past. His charm won her over quickly. He told Kenneth she was smitten, and Christina thought he was humorous and gentlemanly. He seemed like the perfect match. On September 11, 1993, Samuel and Teresa were married. Their early years as a couple were passionate but volatile. They loved deeply, but often clashed. Over time, the darker sides of Samuel's personality began to resurface. Professionally, he had risen through the ranks and was at the peak of his career by 2002. Privately, though, their home had become a battleground. On May 4th of that year, emergency responders were called to the couple's home in response to a domestic disturbance. Samuel, drunk and enraged, was shouting at Teresa, accusing her of infidelity. When police arrived, they found the scene in disarray. Women's clothes and personal belongings scattered across the yard, Teresa in tears, and a visible red mark on her face. When asked about the injury, Teresa claimed she had scratched herself. She declined to press charges and instead asked to stay somewhere else for the night. Under Georgia's Code 17, specifically the predominant aggressor statute, law enforcement officers are required to arrest a suspect in clear cases of domestic violence, even if the victim does not cooperate. Samuel should have been taken into custody, but the police officer in charge didn't act. His silence allowed Samuel to continue living without consequences. This police officer would later justify his inaction that night in 2002 by claiming he didn't want to make Teresa a victim. His decision not to report the incident or arrest Samuel had no official consequence. No record, no follow-up, nothing. The matter simply vanished. By April 2003, Teresa and Samuel tried to patch things up with a vacation. They headed to Panama City Beach, Florida, a resort town lined with over 30 miles of white sand and turquoise water. It should have been a peaceful escape. They spent the day sunbathing and relaxing, eventually settling down for dinner at a beachfront restaurant. But somewhere during the meal, something set Samuel off. His mood turned violent. He threatened to handcuff Teresa, kill himself, and force her to drag his corpse, possibly even hinted he'd take her life as well. The nightmare escalated as they drove away from the restaurant. Samuel fired his revolver out of the car window. Witnesses immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they found Teresa crying and shaken. Samuel, heavily intoxicated, was erratic and combative. Though he admitted to threatening suicide, he denied firing a gun or even having one. But his lie collapsed quickly. Police recovered 2 firearms from his vehicle, one of which had been recently discharged. Due to the nature of the threat and his behavior, Samuel was transported to a mental health facility for evaluation. He went unwillingly. On the way, he told officers something chilling, that with his law enforcement experience, he could hide a body so well no one would ever find it. After 72 hours under observation, he was released and returned home with Teresa. Time did not heal the damage. Samuel's mental state unraveled further, worsened by constant alcohol abuse. He no longer confined his drinking to after hours. It consumed his workdays too. Their home life, already fragile, disintegrated completely. In April 2006, Teresa reached out to 2 of Samuel's colleagues, Dino and Sheriff Steve Wilson, for help. She met with them for 45 minutes and detailed Samuel's erratic behavior, his alcoholism, the Florida incident, and ongoing threats. She made it clear. She didn't want him arrested. She just wanted him out of the house. Soon after, Teresa took the first major step toward freedom. She filed for divorce. Her sister Christina stood by her side, watching as Teresa, instead of despair, radiated relief. It was the right decision. By early 2007, Teresa was planning a fresh start. She searched for a new apartment, hoping to live close to Christina and spend more time with her nephews. Though she still lived under the same roof as Samuel, finding a new home gave her a surge of hope. On March 21, 2007, Teresa found the place she wanted. Moving in energized her. That night, she visited Christina, and they talked excitedly about the new apartment and future plans. But as they hugged goodbye, Christina sensed something strange, an emptiness she couldn't explain. At about 10:30 p.m. from her new apartment, Teresa called her close friend and colleague Rhonda Knox. She said she planned to return briefly to the marital home in Lafayette to pick up some belongings. She would wait until Samuel was asleep, anything to avoid a confrontation. That night, Teresa Parker vanished. At around 2 a.m. on March 22nd, Samuel showed up at the home of Christy Bellflower, a woman he was reportedly seeing. Using her phone, he called fellow officer Ben Chaffin. What he told Ben was horrifying. He had done something to Teresa and claimed no one would ever find her. Before ending the call, he warned Ben to stay quiet or face consequences. At 5 a.m., Samuel left the residence. Investigators believe that sometime during those early hours, he disposed of Teresa's body. They suspect he went to a remote area about 30 miles from Walker County, near a river and hunting trail, a place he knew well from childhood. At 6 a.m., Rhonda Knox received a call from Teresa's phone. No one spoke. The line went dead. Repeated attempts to reach her, by cell and landline, failed. Alarmed, Rhonda contacted Shane Green, a friend in the Walker County Sheriff's Department, and asked him to check on Teresa. Shane and fellow deputy Corey Griffin arrived at the house in Lafayette and searched the perimeter. Samuel's gray truck was parked outside. Though the garage was locked, Shane used his flashlight to peer through a crack. Inside was Samuel's patrol car, but Teresa's vehicle was missing. Christina, unaware of what had happened, assumed her sister was simply busy cleaning her new apartment. But by the afternoon, the situation changed. Teresa's SUV was suddenly back at the house she had shared with Samuel, yet she was nowhere to be seen. Her phone went unanswered. No one had seen her. Even Samuel was calling her. By then, it had been over 24 hours without contact. Christina was frantic. On Saturday, March 24th, the Parker family filed a missing person report. Friends, neighbors, and community members quickly mobilized. They held vigils, posted flyers, and began searching, hoping for a lead. Recognizing the case's sensitivity, Sheriff Steve Wilson brought in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent James Harris was assigned. He began at Teresa's new apartment, where he found some clothes, shoes, and her work uniform, but no sign of Teresa herself. The community rallied. Search teams combed through woods, drained ponds, and sifted through the local landfill. Yet the landscape was vast. Dense forests stretched endlessly around the couple's former home. As suspicions mounted, Special Agent Harris interviewed Samuel. The officer claimed Teresa had left on her own because of their divorce, but inconsistencies in his timeline raised red flags. Something didn't add up. The Parker home was searched 5 times. Investigators confiscated old rifles and weapons, though none seemed directly tied to the disappearance. Samuel lashed out at police, accusing them of unfairly targeting him and suggesting they inspect Teresa's belongings instead. To strengthen their case, investigators used scent-tracking dogs. They introduced the dogs to Samuel's scent from his clothing and patrol car. Released, the dogs followed a trail up a hill, then back down, a pattern that aligned with the theory he had taken a body into the woods. Still, Samuel maintained his story. She had simply left. He accused law enforcement of inventing a narrative with no proof. But the biggest omission came from the officer who had received Samuel's confession. He never told anyone about the call. As months passed and leads dried up, the investigation widened, but the evidence, bit by bit, kept circling back to Samuel. Authorities conducted yet another search of the former marital home. This time, a crime scene technician discovered what appeared to be traces of blood. The case was no longer just a disappearance. As forensic experts continued their work, a disturbing detail emerged. Samuel's vehicle had clearly been cleaned. The interior had been wiped down, scrubbed of any visible traces. But the evidence, quietly building over months, was about to reach a breaking point. After 25 years in law enforcement, Samuel Parker was fired from the Lafayette Police Department, not for misconduct on the streets, but for keeping explosives in his locker at work. The dismissal confirmed what many had long suspected. Samuel was spiraling far beyond the bounds of control. He no longer respected the badge he once worshipped or the institution that had shielded him. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Forensic analysis confirmed that Teresa's blood and Samuel's DNA were found in the back of his truck. With that, on February 4, 2008, Samuel was arrested and formally charged with his wife's murder. He clung to his story that Teresa had gone to Florida or maybe crossed the border, but there was no body, no final proof. Still, the case went to trial. On August 17, 2009, the trial began. He never testified in his own defense. Instead, his legal team argued that Teresa might still be alive. Samuel's first wife took the stand and testified about the horrors she endured. Then, In a moment that shocked everyone in the courtroom, Officer Ben Chaffin finally admitted what he had kept hidden: the early morning phone call from Samuel, where he confessed to killing Teresa and boasted that no one would ever find her body. Witness after witness recalled how Samuel had often bragged about knowing the Georgia woods like the back of his hand, well enough to hide a body that would never be discovered. Using this and a web of circumstantial evidence, the prosecution built a detailed timeline reconstructing how Samuel may have ended Teresa's life and disposed of her remains. The defense pushed back, arguing there was no direct evidence linking him to her death: no body, no weapon, no witness to the act. But in September 2009, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of malice murder, making false statements, and violating his oath as a public official. The judge sentenced Samuel Parker to life in prison without parole. He showed no emotion. Across the aisle, Teresa's family wept. Christina, though grateful for the conviction, couldn't escape a painful truth. Samuel, the man now condemned to spend the rest of his life behind bars, was likely the only one who knew where her sister's body lay, and he refused to talk. Samuel's attorneys filed an appeal, arguing that the evidence was insufficient and the trial flawed. They demanded a new trial. But fate had other plans. 3 years after Teresa disappeared, on the afternoon of Monday, September 20th, 2010, a man named David was taking a break from a long day hauling corn. While walking along a wooded stretch near the eastern bank of the Chattooga River, close to the Alabama border, he stumbled upon something unusual. It was a human jawbone. David immediately alerted authorities. That evening, more skeletal remains were discovered in the same area. As darkness fell, the search was paused. The next day, with a larger team, investigators returned to the scene. Additional bones and pieces of clothing were recovered nearby. Ironically, at the very same time, a separate search effort for Teresa's body was underway, but it was taking place in an entirely different area, far from the state line. Once the remains were secured, forensic experts began their work. Comparing dental records, they made the heartbreaking confirmation: it was Teresa. And even now, he has never spoken of what happened that night. Though investigators had recovered Teresa Parker's remains, one critical mystery remained unsolved: how exactly her body ended up in that remote area. It could have been the site where Samuel originally left her, or the current pushed her remains there over time. No one could say for sure. After 3.5 years exposed to the elements, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of death. But there was no doubt anymore. Teresa had been found. On the night of Tuesday, September 21st, 2010, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Walker County Sheriff's Office began notifying all agencies involved in the case. Most importantly, they contacted Teresa's family. After years of agony and endless searching, the Parker family finally had some form of closure. That Wednesday, just past noon, Sheriff Steve Wilson called a press conference. Between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., local reporters gathered outside the Walker County Courthouse, cameras ready for the announcement: time for the evening news. The conference took place in the public affairs room in the basement of the commissioner's office. "It's a difficult day to report," Sheriff Wilson began, "but it's a day that brings some peace to the family, to her loved ones, to her co-workers, and to the hundreds who worked tirelessly on this case for over 3 years." After his remarks, which lasted about 15 minutes, Wilson took questions from the press. He reaffirmed that his department had never stopped searching for Teresa. Now, with her remains recovered, the jury's verdict felt fully justified. The officials expressed deep sympathy to the Parker family, acknowledging that while nothing could undo their loss, at least they could now lay her to rest. Even among those who had once defended Samuel, doubts had now been silenced. The recovery of Teresa's remains shifted the tide, eroding any remaining faith in the former officer's innocence. Still, criticism lingered over how long it took to locate her body. Many pointed out that law enforcement had focused their searches within a four-county radius, but had never ventured to the southern edge of Chattooga County. It was only thanks to a farmer's accidental discovery that the truth was finally uncovered. A few days later, the police released a medical examiner's report. It confirmed what everyone already suspected. Teresa had been the victim of homicide. However, the report could not identify a specific cause of death. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the method, investigators agreed on one point. None of this new information supported Samuel's appeal. As Sheriff Wilson made clear, the verdict stood firm. On Thursday, October 7, 2010, loved ones gathered at the Walker County Civic Center for a memorial service in Teresa's honor. Friends, family, and community members came to pay their final respects. The next day, a funeral was held at the First Baptist Church of Lafayette. The burial took place on Saturday, October 9th. Sheriff Wilson attended in person. By that time, Samuel Parker had been serving a life sentence for 14 months in a Georgia state prison. In a rare move, he granted an exclusive interview to a local news outlet. With no remorse, he continued to proclaim his innocence, criticized the prosecutors, and accused them of distorting his character. He claimed the evidence was manipulated and that he had been falsely portrayed as violent and unstable, but the courts did not waver. In November 2014, the Georgia Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Justice had prevailed. For the Parker family, Teresa's absence would always be deeply felt. She had been a central part of their lives, a loving sister, daughter, and friend. They knew that no conviction, no sentence, could bring her back. But knowing that the man who had taken her life would never harm another woman brought them a measure of relief. In her memory, the family made a solemn vow to raise awareness about domestic violence, to speak out, to educate, and to ensure that others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Teresa Parker's story became more than a tragedy. It became a call to action.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
The street was quiet. It was late. She had no idea someone was waiting for her in the shadows. Within seconds, the calm was shattered. There was a sudden noise, a shift in her voice, and then silence. What followed was so violent, so planned, that investigators were left stunned. But the most disturbing part? She had warned everyone this could happen, and no one stopped it. Born and raised in Italy, Alessandra Matteuzzi had spent most of her life immersed in the world of fashion. At 56, she worked as a sales representative for a boutique that specialized in women's clothing. Those who knew her best described her as dependable, thoughtful, and refined. She brought precision and grace to everything she did, whether it was assisting a client or caring for a loved one. Alessandra was known for her deep compassion. Her sense of responsibility extended beyond her career. For years, she had been her father's primary caregiver during his final illness, offering unwavering support until his death. The experience left her emotionally drained. After his passing, she withdrew socially, turning inward and hesitating to pursue new relationships. Her mother, who lived in a care home and needed constant assistance, became the center of her daily life. Alessandra maintained a steady routine that included frequent visits to her mother and daily phone calls with her younger sister Stefania, with whom she shared an unshakable bond. Despite her reserved nature, Alessandra maintained an online presence. Her social media accounts revealed glimpses of a peaceful, structured life, photos from family gatherings, elegant outfits from work, and quiet moments at home with her pet. She was not reclusive, but she preferred calm settings and meaningful connections over large crowds or spontaneous socializing. Her world had become smaller, yet it remained deeply personal and intimate. That world shifted in the summer of 2021. It began, like many modern connections do, through social media. Alessandra came across the profile of a young man named Giovanni Padovani. Born in Sicily, Padovani was 26 years old and living a very different life. A professional football player with a side career in modeling, he was active and widely followed online. His posts often featured training clips, travel photos, and behind-the-scenes looks at photo shoots. His digital persona was polished, charming, and widely admired, especially by women. There was nothing about his profile that appeared suspicious. If anything, his openness and approachable tone gave the impression of someone self-assured but grounded. Despite their significant age gap, the initial interaction between Alessandra and Giovanni unfolded with surprising ease. He was respectful and kind, never dismissive or arrogant. Over time, their messages grew more frequent, moving from simple greetings to longer exchanges about daily life and personal thoughts. As their digital conversations evolved into real emotional exchanges, the bond deepened. They communicated almost daily, sharing photos, life updates, and words of encouragement. Eventually, Giovanni arranged to visit Alessandra in person. He traveled to Bologna, where she lived, and spent several days getting to know her in her own environment. He was gentle, observant, and never overstepped. One gesture in particular stood out. He offered to visit Alessandra's mother at the care home. That moment, simple yet meaningful, left a lasting impression. It suggested that he wasn't merely interested in Alessandra, but in the life she had built and the people she loved. In the months that followed, Giovanni continued to visit Bologna. He and Alessandra shared quiet moments, walking through the city, cooking meals, running errands together. He accompanied her in her routines and seemed to enjoy the slower pace of her world. He appeared to care deeply, capturing moments together in photos he sometimes posted online. In private messages, he offered her encouragement and affection. To those observing from the outside, it may have seemed like an unexpected but tender relationship, two very different lives finding common ground. But not long after the new year, that sense of security began to unravel. Padovani's tone shifted. He began calling more often, sometimes several times a day, and his questions became unusually specific. What once felt like affectionate curiosity turned into suspicion. He demanded to know whom she was speaking with, what she was doing, and why. Their chats transformed into interrogations, laced with doubt. Then came the accusations. He insisted she was hiding things from him, details, people, conversations. None of it had any foundation. His fixation didn't stop with Alessandra. He started calling Stefania directly, attempting to convince her of his distorted view of reality. He pleaded for her support, but as his behavior grew more erratic, his tone shifted from persuasion to aggression. Stefania remembered him yelling during phone calls, his voice raised, accusations flying. She eventually made the difficult decision to cut contact altogether. Alessandra, on the other hand, held on. She believed the storm would pass. She didn't argue or provoke. Instead, she tried to calm things, to restore balance. But the man who had once seemed so emotionally in tune began pushing further into her life. His jealousy took root. Casual social media activity, likes, photos, comments, triggered new rounds of conflict. He demanded explanations for even the smallest digital interactions. As his obsession grew, so did his need to control. He started calling at all hours of the night. His messages, once sweet, became a torrent, urgent, aimless, and constant, sometimes angry, sometimes apologetic. Alessandra's peace was shattered. His mood swings were exhausting, his expectations impossible. And yet, he continued to embed himself into her life in increasingly invasive ways. In early 2022, the situation escalated. After one of his visits, Alessandra noticed something was wrong with her digital accounts. She had been locked out of her email and social media profiles. Attempts to recover them revealed that the new passwords contained clues, phrases, and references connected directly to Giovanni. She suspected he had accessed her computer. The deeper she looked, the worse it became. Her WhatsApp account had been linked to a foreign device, and spyware was later discovered on her phone. This software wasn't just for monitoring, it gave Giovanni the ability to read her messages, review her call logs, and track her location in real time. His surveillance wasn't incidental, it was systematic and deliberate. That suspicion was confirmed when he began referencing private conversations, ones Alessandra had never shared with him. He knew who she had talked to and when. He confronted her with twisted interpretations of her digital interactions, convinced she was being unfaithful, even in the absence of any evidence. The intensity of his delusions only grew. He demanded proof of her whereabouts, short videos sent every 10 minutes. These clips were meant to verify where she was and who she was with. Refusing to comply brought out his rage. He'd threaten to end the relationship, accuse her of betrayal, or bombard her with messages until she gave in. His tone became cold, authoritarian. Alessandra no longer felt like a participant in the relationship. She felt surveilled, evaluated, and trapped. Then came the most chilling revelation. Giovanni had somehow gained access to her home surveillance system. A screenshot he shared in a message to his mother, a still image of Alessandra from inside her apartment, confirmed it. He had been watching her, live, inside the place she once considered safe. The violation was total. By mid-2022, Giovanni's behavior had turned openly predatory. He wasn't just watching online, he began following her in person. He loitered near her apartment building in Bologna, appearing at odd hours without warning. Neighbors noticed. One resident spotted him trying to enter the complex. Another saw him on the roof. He was no longer hiding his intentions. Alessandra warned her neighbors not to open the door for him. Her life was now ruled by anxiety. He had become unpredictable, volatile. And then came the damage. Her car was tampered with, its lights disabled by cut wiring. Her apartment lost power after someone had removed the fuses. These weren't just acts of vandalism, they were calculated provocations designed to force her into physical proximity with him. There were sounds of shouting, heavy thuds against her walls, items in her home smashed or broken. At one point, he climbed back onto the roof, attempting another break-in. His jealousy, once disguised as affection, had spiraled into obsession. All boundaries had been obliterated. The woman who had once lived a quiet, structured life, rooted in routine, family, and compassion, was now living in a state of constant fear. Alessandra was no longer in a relationship. She was being hunted. She began carrying pepper spray. It was a small shift, but for a woman who had once lived with grace and self-assurance, it marked a major emotional rupture. Fear had settled into every part of her day. She told friends and family that returning home filled her with anxiety. Occasionally, she found refuge at her sister Stefania's house. Though the temporary relief never lasted, her dog remained behind in the apartment, and for Alessandra, leaving him behind entirely wasn't an option. That emotional tether forced her back, again and again, into the orbit of danger. Between July and August, the situation became increasingly volatile. Alessandra confided in Stefania, sharing incidents of intimidation and escalating aggression. Still, even amid the fear, she continued looking for ways to diffuse the situation. She avoided direct confrontation, perhaps hoping that silence or calm might blunt the obsession. But Giovanni responded to her distance not with withdrawal, but with escalation. He took it as an affront, something that needed correcting. On July 29, 2022, Alessandra made her first formal move toward protection. She filed a police report documenting Giovanni's obsessive behavior, the repeated intrusions into her privacy, and his increasingly erratic presence around her home. She came prepared, with screenshots of messages, photos of him near her residence, and details of the stalking that had defined her recent months. But no urgent measures were taken. Days passed. The fear didn't subside. On August 3rd, she returned to the police with new evidence, additional sightings, further interference. Once again, she shared her concerns. But the case remained in an early phase. Investigators noted her claims but made no protective recommendations. There was no restraining order, no formal warning, no police presence near her building. By August 8th, she was back again. The harassment hadn't stopped. Giovanni continued to appear near her home and attempted to enter the building. She documented each new incident, the car damage, the power disruptions, and the attempted break-ins. His messages were growing more hostile. Still, the official response remained unchanged. A fourth visit came on August 13th. Alessandra, by then, was exhausted and terrified. She was being watched, followed, and digitally tracked. Giovanni's control extended into her private communications and daily routines. She made it clear she feared for her life. She gave police direct quotes from his messages, words filled with threats and psychological manipulation. One of her statements stood out with horrifying clarity. "I don't want to die." It was more than a plea. It was a warning. But even this wasn't enough to spur decisive action. Authorities pointed to procedural limitations. More witness statements were required. Some delays, they said, were due to vacation schedules. Investigators downplayed the danger. Because there had been no physical attack, some viewed the case as merely harassment, not as a precursor to violence. They underestimated what was unfolding in plain sight. Her family would later challenge that failure. They argued that the warnings had been clear, consistent, and serious. The progression was obvious. What began as digital obsession had become physical intimidation. Giovanni's behavior was no longer reactive, it was calculated, repetitive, dangerous. And then came the clearest evidence of all. On August 20th, 2022, just 3 days before the final act, Giovanni created a checklist on his phone. Investigators would later find it in his notes app. The list wasn't vague. It included specific items: duct tape, a hammer, restraints. Beneath that was a written plan: simulate a conversation, find a way to get inside, bring the necessary tools. The level of detail removed any doubt about his intentions. This wasn't spontaneous rage. It was methodical planning. On August 21st, Giovanni left Sicily, where he had been engaged in football-related activities, and traveled to Senigallia under the guise of personal business. From there, he continued his journey, ultimately arriving in Bologna on August 22nd. Digital records would later confirm Giovanni's movements in chilling detail. He had slipped into Bologna quietly, informing no one, not even Alessandra. After arriving on August 22nd, 2022, he hid a hammer in a bush close to Alessandra's apartment building, strategically placed in a secluded corner of the residential complex. He had scouted the area in advance, carefully planning each step. At some point that same day, he climbed to the rooftop of the building. From above, he watched and waited, tracking Alessandra's comings and goings. This surveillance was not new. He had been monitoring her for months, but this time, he was no longer satisfied with watching. Weeks earlier, Giovanni had written a note in his phone. Dated July 2nd, it read, "I'll end her because she ended me emotionally." In it, he painted himself as a victim, claiming he had been manipulated, discarded, and driven to the edge. He admitted full awareness of the consequences. "I know I'll end up in prison. This note will explain to the police what she did to me." His intentions were unmistakable. What was about to happen had been decided long before he made the trip north. On the evening of August 23rd, Alessandra returned home, unaware that Giovanni was nearby. It was just after 9 p.m. She was speaking on the phone with her sister Stefania, a routine conversation between two women whose connection had always been rooted in trust. As Alessandra approached the building entrance, Giovanni stepped out from his hiding spot. The assault began in seconds. Stefania, still on the call, heard a sudden shift. Alessandra's voice changed, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle. In that brief moment, everything unraveled. Witnesses later recounted seeing Giovanni lunge at her. He retrieved the hidden hammer and delivered a blow so forceful that the head of the tool snapped from the handle. But the attack didn't stop there. Giovanni continued beating her with his fists, then lifted a heavy wrought iron bench, situated just outside the entrance, and used it to strike her again and again. He acted with explosive violence, delivering multiple crushing blows. Forensic reports would later reveal over 20 traumatic injuries. Alessandra's skull, chest, arms, and legs bore the marks of a brutal assault. Her body was found with signs of blunt force trauma, deep fractures, and evidence she had been dragged across the ground. Despite the noise, despite the commotion, he made no attempt to escape. When police arrived, he was sitting near the building's front door, waiting. Officers described him as calm, his demeanor eerily composed. "Good thing you came," he said upon arrest. There was no struggle, no signs of remorse, only a chilling acceptance of what he had done. Alessandra was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. The injuries were catastrophic. She died within minutes of arrival. The evidence left no room for doubt. His actions were methodical. There was no effort to cover his tracks or disguise the crime. The precision, The timing, the location of the weapon, everything indicated premeditation. Witnesses described him as swift and unwavering, moving with the certainty of someone who had rehearsed it in his mind many times. Stefania's phone call, along with the physical and digital trail, became critical in reconstructing the exact sequence of events. The entire attack lasted only a few minutes, but it was the culmination of months of calculated psychological torment. Following his arrest, Giovanni was transferred to a psychiatric facility. He initially invoked his right to remain silent, but later made statements in which he blamed Alessandra for the outcome. He claimed emotional devastation, saying she had broken him. Investigators, however, saw through the facade. The crime had been planned, documented, and executed with chilling precision. Though his defense team pushed for a psychiatric evaluation, the court-appointed experts found him to be fully aware of his actions. He exhibited obsessive behavior and a pattern of control, but he did not meet the criteria for legal insanity. His mind was intact, his intentions were conscious. At sentencing, Giovanni spoke briefly. He called the experience a nightmare and told the court that if they believed he was sane, he deserved the harshest penalty. He tried to cast himself as a shattered man, but the court was unmoved. His victim-blaming narrative collapsed under the weight of the evidence. On February 12, 2024, Giovanni was found guilty of stalking and the premeditated murder of Alessandra Matteuzzi. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court cited aggravating factors: the extreme cruelty of the attack, his lack of remorse, and the extensive psychological abuse that preceded the crime. The aftermath didn't end in the courtroom. After Alessandra's death, a wave of online hostility emerged, targeting her. On social media, cruel comments flooded the news articles. Strangers mocked her appearance, her clothing, her age, and the age gap between her and Giovanni. Some even suggested she had provoked him. Among the most shocking was a public comment from Donatello Alberti, a regional Red Cross official, who insinuated that her appearance justified his jealousy. The backlash was immediate. Alberti was swiftly removed from his position. Alessandra's family took action. They filed complaints against 25 individuals for their online abuse, and the Bologna prosecutor's office launched a rare and unprecedented investigation into posthumous cyber harassment. The case set a new legal precedent in Italy, marking one of the first times digital defamation against a deceased victim had been prosecuted at scale. In the eyes of the court and the public, Giovanni's crime was not just a murder. It was the endpoint of a long campaign of control, psychological, digital, physical, and a tragic illustration of a system that didn't act in time. Experts later identified his behavior as classic Othello syndrome, a pathological condition marked by delusional jealousy. Unlike ordinary jealousy, this disorder involves obsessive thoughts, irrational suspicion of infidelity, and a refusal to accept reality. In its most severe forms, it leads to violence. And for Alessandra Matteuzzi, it led to her death.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
That night was supposed to be simple. Brittany Steyer had spent the evening with friends, laughing and celebrating. Now, all she needed to do was pick up her kids and head home. Her best friend was with her, riding in the passenger seat, both of them feeling a little on edge as they drove through the dark Florida roads. When they pulled into the driveway of the small trailer, something didn't feel right. There were people outside, empty beer cans scattered around, and a heavy tension in the air. Brittany tried to stay calm as she walked toward the door to get her children, but in just a few minutes, everything would go horribly wrong. And what happened next would change everything forever. Brittany Steyer was born on June 10, 1989, in the small city of Stuart, Florida. She grew up just a short drive away in Port St. Lucie, where she was raised alongside her older sister Christy by their parents, Betsy and Joe. Betsy, a minister, went on to found her own church, while Joe built a career with a development company. Although Brittany's parents divorced when she was around 5, they remained committed to co-parenting, ensuring that both daughters split their time between homes without feeling torn between them. From an early age, Brittany's vibrant personality and warm spirit stood out. As a teenager, she spent her summers volunteering at a church camp in Silver Springs. There, she became known for organizing dance competitions, acting in skits, and taking part in talent shows. Her confidence and ability to inspire others were evident even in those early experiences. In her early 20s, Brittany began working as a cashier at a local Winn-Dixie grocery store. It didn't take long for her strong work ethic and outgoing charm to get noticed. She quickly climbed the ranks, moving from cashier to front-end manager, and later to a grocery manager role overseeing both the grocery and produce departments. Around this time, Brittany's life took a turn when she met Edward June McNeil Harris Jr., a 28-year-old employee at the local Burger King. June, who already had 5 children from 2 previous relationships, might have seemed like a complicated choice, but Brittany's nurturing nature drew her to him. She embraced his children with open arms, treating them as if they were her own. Friends, however, were wary from the beginning. Heather, one of Brittany's closest friends, recalled feeling a deep unease when she first encountered June. Although their introduction was brief, just a quick meeting while Brittany picked up food at Burger King, Heather sensed that something was off. Heather's concerns deepened after she discreetly asked her husband, a police officer, about June. His reaction was instant and severe. Without going into details, he urgently warned that Brittany needed to stay away from him. Alarmed, Heather tried to caution Brittany, but the warnings fell on deaf ears. Brittany defended June fiercely, convinced that others simply didn't understand the bond they shared. Despite the concerns, Brittany's relationship with June deepened quickly. She saw him as someone who brought joy into her life, someone who understood her adventurous, full-hearted nature. It was easy for Brittany to overlook the warning signs, choosing instead to believe in the good she saw in him. By early 2016, just months into their relationship, Brittany learned she was pregnant. The news filled her with excitement. She embraced the idea of becoming a mother wholeheartedly, seeing it as the start of a beautiful new chapter. However, that happiness was soon eclipsed by a devastating development. Brittany went into premature labor at just 5 months, setting into motion a series of events that would ultimately redefine the course of her life. The situation Brittany faced in the hospital was dire. As a first-time mother, overwhelmed and frightened, She needed support more than ever. She reached out to her sister, Christy, who rushed to her side. But June was nowhere to be found. Christy frantically tried to reach him, calling his phone, driving to his trailer, pounding on the doors and windows. Hours passed, but June never appeared. Tragically, Brittany miscarried her daughter, a baby she had already named Jade. The loss was devastating. June's absence during that critical moment revealed a side of him that could no longer be ignored. It was a red flag that stood in stark contrast to the image Brittany had tried so hard to believe in. Yet, in a pattern that would repeat itself, Brittany chose to forgive him. She clung to hope and carried on with the relationship. Seeking a fresh start, Brittany moved in March 2016 to live with her father in the city of Bradenton. The move offered her a chance to heal, to build a new life away from the pain and disappointment. She quickly found work as a salesperson at a sign company where her father was employed. Her natural charm and strong work ethic once again won over those around her. But distance did little to sever the bond between Brittany and June. Most weekends she made the 6-hour drive back to see him, shouldering all the travel and expenses. It was Brittany who invested in the relationship, while June gave little in return, a pattern that would come to define their time together. By 2017, tired of the long-distance strain, Brittany convinced June to move to Bradenton. She found an apartment for them and helped him land a job with her brother-in-law's appliance installation company. But almost immediately, problems surfaced. Though June was capable at the work, his temper often flared, leading to conflicts with co-workers and repeated warnings from his employer. As they settled into their new life, the cracks widened. Brittany's once bright personality began to dim. Her co-workers noticed she had grown quieter, more withdrawn. She started covering up, wearing long sleeves and pants, even during Florida's sweltering summers. When asked, she would brush it off with easy excuses, never letting anyone get close enough to see the truth. Brittany's family saw the changes too. Her mother and stepfather, who had met June early on, sensed his controlling nature. They noticed how Brittany worked multiple jobs to support their household, while June contributed little and demanded much. She gave everything she had, emotionally, financially, physically. He took and took until there was almost nothing left. Her mother reflected later that Brittany, raised to love unconditionally and see the best in people, believed she could heal the broken parts of June. If she loved him enough, she thought, maybe she could fix him. In February 2018, Brittany discovered she was pregnant. Joy and apprehension collided. She was thrilled at the idea of becoming a mother again, but quietly fearful of what the future might hold. Her fears deepened when she showed up to a family gathering with a dark bruise under her eye, poorly hidden by makeup. When questioned, she claimed she had fallen in the shower, another excuse offered with a tight smile. On March 2, 2018, Brittany gave birth to a baby boy. For a fleeting moment, there was happiness. Their little family seemed complete. But just 3 months later, Brittany learned she was pregnant again. While the news was unexpected, Brittany welcomed it with her usual optimism, throwing herself into preparations for the new baby. In February 2019, she gave birth to a daughter. With 2 young children and a new, larger apartment to call home, Brittany appeared to be building the life she had always wanted. But behind the facade, the emotional abuse intensified. The walls were closing in. Brittany noticed troubling changes in her son's behavior. He would lash out unexpectedly, mimicking the aggression he had witnessed at home, then immediately seek affection. It was a heartbreaking mirror of the chaos unfolding inside their apartment. This realization shook Brittany to her core. She could no longer deny the truth. By staying, She wasn't just risking her own well-being, she was exposing her children to a dangerous, damaging environment. And for Brittany, a mother whose love knew no bounds, that was a cost she could no longer bear. On January 31st, 2020, Brittany finally made her decision. That morning, June, who had the day off, announced he was going out with friends around 10 or 11 a.m. Brittany didn't argue. Instead, she quietly packed her belongings into plastic bags, loaded them into her car, and left. She called her sister Christy and asked her to meet in Orlando for a trip to Disney World. On the surface, it was a spontaneous getaway, a chance for the children to experience some joy. But beneath it, this trip was Brittany's first real attempt at breaking free, at reclaiming a sense of normalcy for herself and her children. After the weekend, reality returned. Brittany knew she couldn't go back. She reached out to her parents and asked if she could move back in with them. It was a step toward independence, but it was also a dangerous one. June, unwilling to let her go, began flooding her phone with calls and messages, begging, apologizing, threatening, cycling through every tactic to pull her back. Leaving an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous time for a victim. Brittany's case would tragically prove this to be true. On February 11th, 2020, Brittany walked into the Sarasota Police Department to file a report against June. She detailed a terrifying incident that had occurred just days earlier. After she left him, Brittany had agreed to meet June briefly to pick up belongings from their shared apartment. What was supposed to be a short, civil exchange turned into a nightmare. Inside the apartment, June held Brittany at gunpoint for hours. He threatened her life, threatened the lives of their children, and painted horrific scenarios, killing Brittany and the children, or killing Brittany and calling her father to come collect them before ending his own life. The terror Brittany endured during those hours was unimaginable, and even more devastating was the fact that her young children witnessed it all. Following her report, June was arrested. At the Sarasota Police Department, he refused to answer questions and demanded an attorney. He was booked into the Sarasota County Jail, facing charges of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and illegal possession of a firearm, a serious offense for a convicted felon. For Brittany, June's arrest should have been the beginning of a safer, freer life. But in a heartbreaking decision so common among survivors of abuse, Brittany dropped the charges. Persuaded by promises from June's family that he would get therapy, that they would oversee his treatment, Brittany was torn between her fear and her compassion. She later confided in her father that she couldn't bear the thought of their children growing up with their father locked away for life. Her decision was driven by hope, a hope that, tragically, would not be rewarded. In the months that followed, Brittany poured herself into rebuilding her life. She focused on her children, worked hard, and began reconnecting with friends she had drifted away from during her relationship with June. Her Facebook posts showed a woman rediscovering herself, smiling, attending gatherings, laughing again. It was clear to everyone who knew her that Brittany was on the road to healing. But June was never far behind. Despite everything, Brittany allowed June limited contact with the children. She wanted them to have a relationship with their father, even if it meant treading carefully herself. June continued his pattern: apologies, promises, manipulation, all aimed at pulling Brittany back into his orbit. On July 18th, 2020, Brittany traveled to Crawfordville to attend a friend's engagement party, excited to fulfill her role as maid of honor. She dropped the children off with June, planning to pick them up the next day. For a while, Brittany allowed herself to enjoy the night, laughing, celebrating, surrounded by friends who were happy to see her smiling again. But as the evening wore on, a message from June arrived. He demanded that she come pick up the children immediately. The change in Brittany was instant. Her face, moments ago full of joy, became tense and worried. She turned to her friend Heather for support and asked her to come along as she went to retrieve the children. Neither of them could have imagined what was about to unfold. The drive was tense. Brittany was visibly nervous, her usual bright demeanor replaced by a heavy, anxious silence. They arrived at June's trailer around 10:30 p.m. The property was cloaked in darkness, lit only by the van's headlights. As Brittany pulled into the driveway, they could see a group of people gathered near an above-ground pool. Beer cans and empty bottles littered a makeshift table, evidence of an ongoing party. Brittany approached the trailer door. June opened it, holding their infant daughter in his arms. With Brittany's little boy trailing behind, the exchange appeared calm at first. Heather watched from the passenger seat as Brittany took the baby and began securing her into the car seat. Then, everything changed. Without warning, June pulled out a firearm. In an instant, gunfire shattered the quiet night. Heather, acting on instinct, jumped into the driver's seat. The side door of the van was still open. She could hear the children screaming in the back. Throwing the van into reverse, she tore down the dirt road, desperate to get them to safety. Moments later, Heather pulled over, her voice trembling as she made a frantic 911 call.
Say your emergency.
Hey, I am with my friend, and we're down by it, and he just got her.
Okay, what do you mean he got?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
How exactly did he get hurt?
He shot her. He was like, okay, so we went to pick up her kids, and we went to pick up her kids, and he come out and was acting really weird, and he started shooting at her.
Okay, and he shot. So he shot her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have one of her kids with me.
Okay.
Oh, the door's open. Crap. Oh, God, I'm trying to, I don't know her code. Yeah, her sister.
Okay. Is she conscious? Like, where did she get shot at?
I don't know. I left because I have my child with me, too. I'm trying to get to her sister.
Is she still there?
Yeah, she's still there. I didn't know what else to do. Like, the van door went shut. I gotta pull over. Hold on, baby. Hold on.
Ma'am.
Yes.
On the road right there? Okay.
Hold on, baby. Let me close the van. Okay.
Amid the chaos and confusion, she struggled to explain what had happened, that Brittany had been shot, that the children were with her, that they had fled for their lives. Back at the scene, June Harris fled in his vehicle. Police units responding to Heather's call quickly spotted a green car speeding away. A pursuit began. June's driving was erratic, turning aimlessly through parking lots, doubling back on roads as if he couldn't decide where to run. The chase ended when June pulled over near Spring Creek Highway. He made no attempt to resist as officers approached and took him into custody. Meanwhile, detectives returned to the scene Brittany had fled from. There, on the ground near the trailer, they found Brittany's body. She had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. Nearby, a baby bottle lay abandoned on the dirt, a stark and heartbreaking reminder of the two young children now left motherless. The news of Brittany's murder devastated her family and sent shockwaves through the community. It was hard to reconcile the vibrant, giving young woman they had known with the brutal reality of her death. In the weeks that followed, more chilling details emerged. Investigators discovered that earlier that evening, June had sent Brittany a series of aggressive text messages. He had demanded sex from her as a reward for looking after the children during the bridal shower. When Brittany didn't respond as he wanted, his messages grew angrier, revealing a dangerous, escalating rage that would culminate in murder. June Harris was charged with first-degree murder, child neglect, fleeing and eluding law enforcement, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. His trial began on December 16, 2022. Despite the defense's efforts to raise doubts, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Text messages, witness accounts, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence all pointed to the same conclusion. On December 21, 2022, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on all counts. June Harris was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with 3 consecutive 15-year sentences for the additional charges. For Brittany's family, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but no sentence could bring Brittany back. Her children would grow up without their mother, and her family would carry the weight of her absence forever. Brittany's story became a sobering reminder of the unseen battles victims of domestic violence often face, and the devastating cost when their cries for help go unheard.
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Your fault emergency.
Hi, you guys have been out to my house twice today, and then most recently the deputy talked to my wife into letting me in the house, and then she locked me in the garage, and I tried to break my arm when I was trying to get back inside.
What's your address, sir?
6184 Jenks, Kenks Drive. She's currently got me locked in the garage because earlier she broke both of the big doors, and when I tried to...
What was that?
You just shot me!
Born in May 1987 in the United States, Bree Kuhn spent her early years in the care of her parents and older brother, Eric Jr. While her exact birthplace remains unconfirmed, records indicate the family lived in Pennsylvania before the parents' eventual divorce. After the separation, Bree and her brother relocated to Texas with their mother, whose name has not been publicly disclosed. As shared by Eric Jr., when he reached 9th grade, Bree left Texas to live with their father, Eric, in New York. At that time, Eric had begun a new life with a woman named Karen. Despite the distance, the siblings remained close, reuniting for important moments and maintaining strong emotional ties. Their relationship with their mother, however, was fraught. According to Eric, she was physically abusive, and Bree often shielded him from the worst of it. She took on a protective older sibling role, enduring punishment herself to defend her younger brother. These formative experiences left a lasting impact. During her teenage years, Bree began grappling with depression and anxiety. By age 13, she had attempted to take her own life. Despite these challenges, she pursued education through 2 community colleges and, still in her youth,
enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Over a 17-year career, Bree served in various naval stations across the country. In 2009, Bree gave birth to her first daughter, Kaylee, with her then-partner James. Their relationship eventually ended, and Bree retained custody, while James had visitation rights on weekends. Later, Bree entered a relationship with fellow military member Colin Turner. Colin, born on December 28, 1987, was raised in a devout, close-knit family in the care of his parents Terry and Donald Turner, alongside his sisters Nicole and Rebecca. He was known for his warmth and deep dedication to family. Professionally, he served in the Marine Corps, specializing in explosive ordnance disposal. Before meeting Bree, Colin had married Casey Gottsman in 2009. That same year, they welcomed a son, who remained in Casey's custody after their separation but was still raised with the love of his paternal family. Bree and Colin married on May 29, 2016, forming a new household with Bree's daughter, Kaylee. Colin embraced Kaylee as his own, and she quickly became a beloved granddaughter to the Turners. In April 2017, Bree gave birth to their son, John Patrick, followed by the arrival of their daughter, Lonnie, in August 2018. Colin retired from the Marines after 14 years of service. After retirement, he pursued a degree in electrical engineering through Arizona State University, balancing his studies with stay-at-home parenting duties, including helping Kaylee with remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. By this time, the family had settled in Gulf Breeze, Florida, a coastal community known for its low crime rates, recreational spaces, and family-friendly atmosphere. Outwardly, their life seemed stable and supportive. However, behind closed doors, things were more complicated. According to Eric Jr., Bree confided that their relationship had become strained. On one occasion, Eric visited in hopes that his presence might ease tensions between the couple. During that visit, Colin reportedly remarked, both privately and in front of Bree, that they got along because they were both narcissistic psychopaths. Eric also noted that Bree felt overwhelmed as the sole financial provider while Colin focused on his studies and childcare. Despite Eric's concerns and advice to leave the relationship, Bree hesitated. She feared Colin's potential legal advantage in a custody dispute, especially given her mental health history and the financial support he might receive from his family. In April 2021, Bree made another suicide attempt. While speaking on the phone with her brother, she overdosed on pills and alcohol. Eric, realizing what was happening, urgently contacted Colin, who was home with her but allegedly took no action to help. Eric then called emergency services himself. Bree was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for about 10 days and again a month later for a week-long stay. During her recovery, Bree reported work-related stress and blamed Colin for interfering with her job, which she claimed led to further complications. However, she never publicly accused him of any psychological, physical, or sexual abuse. After her hospitalization, Bree enrolled in an intensive outpatient program and resumed work at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola as an assistant to the command chief under a limited-duty sailor status that allowed her to continue treatment while staying engaged in her career. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Bree began seeking legal assistance. On Wednesday, September 8, 2021, she reached out to a group of mothers via a messaging app, asking for recommendations for a lawyer. She noted that the situation could turn ugly, as it involved both children and property disputes. But no legal advice could have prepared anyone for what came next. At 12:53 p.m. that same day, Bree placed a call to 911.
She reported a domestic dispute with her husband and requested police assistance at their home. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the family's residence. The first thing they saw was Colin seated calmly in a beach chair at the edge of their driveway. Colin informed them that Bree had a shotgun and a pistol inside the bedroom. He admitted he also had a firearm stored in his truck. Colin emphasized that Bree had been the one to call the police. When asked where Bree was, Colin led one of the officers to the home's entrance and pointed toward the kitchen. As the officer entered, Bree and Colin's young son approached, curiously asking about the equipment on the officer's belt. Bree appeared shortly after, visibly frustrated. The officer explained that unless there were visible injuries or concrete proof of physical violence, there was little they could do in that moment. Bree responded with bitter sarcasm, saying that next time she would make sure her husband hit her in the face. The officer attempted to de-escalate the situation and informed her that without a court order or restraining order, they couldn't stop Colin from seeing or taking the children, especially since 2 of them were biologically his. Asked whether she wanted to file a formal complaint, Bree declined, stating she only wanted to remove her children from the house. The officer said he would speak with Colin while she packed some belongings. Outside, as officers questioned Colin about any possible physical confrontation, Bree began moving items from Colin's truck into her own vehicle. When Colin realized what she was doing, he firmly stated that he wouldn't allow her to take the kids. He claimed he was the children's primary caregiver and only wanted to take them to his parents' home in Georgia for a few days to let things cool down. He denied any intention of keeping them from her. One officer advised Colin that if there was no violence involved, police could not intervene in parenting matters. The officer also asked if Colin wished to submit a formal report, to which he agreed. Paperwork was retrieved from the patrol vehicle and distributed to both parties. When Bree saw her form, she asked the officer what she should do if her husband hit her after they left. The officer advised her to keep her phone's camera recording as evidence. The officers then left. But just a few hours later, around 5 p.m., another 911 call came from the same residence. This time, it was Colin on the line. When police arrived again, they found Colin outside holding their youngest daughter. He told officers that Bree was refusing to let him back into the house. Bree emerged, attempting to take the child from Colin's arms. Officers intervened and encouraged her to return inside so they could speak calmly. After confirming that Colin lived in the house and co-owned the property, an officer told him he had a legal right to enter the home. Though not encouraging him to use force, the officer emphasized his lawful access. Colin asked the officer to accompany him inside, wary of another confrontation. As they talked, Colin explained that Bree had tried to take the child into the house, but the child had started screaming, not wanting to go inside without her father. The officer asked if there had been a physical confrontation, to which Colin said no. He added that the incident was part of an ongoing dispute dating back years. Meanwhile, Bree told officers they had been discussing divorce and that Colin wanted to take the kids to Georgia. She accused him of physical aggression, stating the earlier police visit had failed to protect her. She also claimed Colin had contacted her superiors at work, possibly making emotional abuse allegations. The officer reiterated that Bree could not legally prevent Colin from entering his own home. He suggested they find a temporary arrangement, separate bedrooms, limited contact, for the sake of the children. But Bree refused, insisting that allowing him in could result in further violence. She again mentioned her prior abuse allegation and expressed concern about being hurt once more. Again, the officer told her to record anything that happened. But Bree clearly wanted more than advice. She wanted protection that the system, at that point, could not provide. When the officer suggested everyone enter the house together, Bree refused. The officer then turned to Colin, who calmly provided the children's information. During the exchange, Colin mentioned Bree's mental health issues. The officer acknowledged this, noting he had previously responded to a crisis at the home in March when Bree had attempted to take her life. He reminded Colin of the same advice given back then: remain separated within the home for the safety of everyone involved. He also pointed out that standing outside in the intense heat with a small child amid biting mosquitoes was unsustainable. Before heading inside again, Colin asked the officer to retrieve his wallet, which Bree had allegedly taken from his vehicle. At the door, Bree met the officer. When asked about the wallet, she denied having it and said she had only taken Colin's credit card. The officer reminded her that a wallet is personal property, not something shared in marriage, and instructed her to return it if she had taken it. In a calm but firm tone, the officer told Bree she had to allow Colin and their daughter back into the home. Bree agreed, but only on the condition that Colin would not harass her or the children. The officer reassured her that if anything happened, she could call them again. As the officer prepared to leave, he returned to inform Colin that Bree claimed not to know where the wallet was. Colin simply smiled, suggesting he'd let it go, but nothing would be let go. Less than 2 hours later, at exactly 6:22 p.m., a third and final 911 call came from the Turner residence. Colin Turner, just 33 years old, had been fatally shot. The final fatal gunshot rang out while the 911 operator was still on the line. On the porch, officers found Bree, then 34, sitting calmly. As they approached, she spontaneously confessed she had shot her husband. She was taken into custody without resistance. When asked about the children, Bree said she had taken them to a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Paramedics checked her over while officers made sure she was physically stable. When asked if she could breathe properly or needed medical care, she didn't respond, so emergency personnel were instructed to evaluate her. Bree was taken to the police station for questioning. The interrogation was slow, fragmented by long silences and frequent crying. Bree managed to recount the long-term dynamics of her marriage. She described Colin as the primary caregiver and said that she felt she had no chance of obtaining custody because of her mental health history. In scattered phrases, Bree explained that Colin had threatened to take the children to Georgia and had physically assaulted her. She said he warned her that if she reported him, no one would believe her because she was crazy. Bree admitted to removing the batteries from the garage door opener to prevent Colin from leaving with the kids. She insisted he was faking concern about her mental health as a manipulation tactic because she had finally decided to file for divorce. She told investigators she had a legal appointment set for the following day. When asked what happened in the moments leading up to the shooting, Bree said her memory was blurry after the second police visit. She claimed Colin tried to get into the house again through the garage, but was blocked. There was still a side door leading inside, and according to Bree, Colin used it to re-enter the home. That's when, she said, she tried to stop him. The next thing she remembered, she was knocking on a neighbor's door, delivering her children to safety, and returning, she said, to help her husband. Investigators pushed for more clarity. They wanted a coherent explanation, something that could make sense of what had happened. Bree offered only fragments. She returned to the garage and saw blood everywhere. Throughout the interrogation, Bree repeatedly asked to call her father. Eventually, she was given a phone and managed to reach him. The 18-minute call was mostly filled with sobs. Her father tried to console her, telling her she would likely spend the night in jail and urging her to reach out if she felt like harming herself again. He reminded her that things could get better, to hold on and find the light at the end of the tunnel. Toward the end of the call, Bree asked if her father could take custody of her two youngest children. He didn't give her a clear answer, only saying they needed to speak with Colin's mother. He also encouraged her to cooperate with a public defender if necessary until a better legal option became available. Bree then confessed something heartbreaking. She didn't know what was worse, knowing Colin was dead or realizing that she was the one who had killed him. A month later, in early October 2021, a Santa Rosa County grand jury indicted Bree Kuhn for first-degree premeditated murder in the death of her husband, Colin James Turner. The prosecution had not yet announced whether they would pursue a sentence of life imprisonment or the death penalty. On October 16th, Colin's family and friends gathered to say their final goodbye at a military funeral honoring his 14 years of service with the U.S. Marine Corps. The American flag, symbolizing his service, was handed to his eldest son, Brody Turner. Left without either parent, his youngest kids were taken in by their paternal grandparents, who embraced them with love, trying to mend what could never fully heal. After 3 years of delays, on Tuesday, September 24, 2024, the long-awaited trial of Bree Kuhn, now 37, began in the Santa Rosa County Courthouse. The prosecution painted the act as a cold-blooded, calculated murder. He methodically outlined the timeline of September 8, 2021, arguing that Bree had deliberately ended her husband's life after a day of escalating tension. The defense took a very different approach. They claimed Bree had been a victim of battered woman syndrome, suffering years of psychological and emotional abuse at the hands of a husband who had become increasingly unstable after suffering a traumatic brain injury in the military. They argued that Colin posed a serious threat to both Bree and the children. Over 4 days, the court heard testimony from a range of witnesses. The jury and courtroom audience watched the full body cam footage from the responding officers, showing each police interaction on the day of the incident. Viewers heard Bree's sarcasm, Colin's calm demeanor, and finally, the chilling 911 call where gunshots were captured live. Every officer involved testified in court, one confirmed responding to a previous suicide attempt by Bree months earlier. Another described the crime scene in detail: the garage, the blood, the body of Colin slumped in a chair, the weapon in its holster nearby. A crime scene analyst presented a series of photographs, helping jurors visualize where Colin's body had been found, far from the home's entry, seated on a portable cooler, consistent with a stationary victim. Shell casings, bullet fragments, and even Colin's phone, still connected to the 911 operator, were found beneath him. Prescriptions linked to Bree's ADHD and mental health treatments were introduced into evidence, as was the testimony of Cray Forum, Bree's supervisor at the Pensacola Naval Station. Forum testified that Bree had been on limited duty due to mental health concerns. He said that on the day of the shooting, Bree failed to report for work, and Colin had called him saying Bree had cut off access to family finances and sabotaged household electronics. Colin also told Forum that Bree had missed therapy sessions and that he was considering taking the children to Georgia. Forum testified that Colin was calm and composed during the call. He offered Colin contact information for a family counselor and later spoke to Bree, who claimed her husband was lying and planning to take the kids unjustly. On the second day of trial, the prosecution called forensic pathologist Dr. Diana Oleski to the stand. Although she had not performed the autopsy on Colin Turner herself, the original medical examiner had died in a car accident before the trial, Dr. Oleski had reviewed the findings and prepared to present the conclusions. She confirmed what the autopsy had revealed. Colin had been shot 4 times, all from behind. The bullets entered between his shoulders and his chest. One particularly devastating shot had traveled from his left shoulder exited through the side of his neck and ultimately lodged in his right wrist. The cumulative trauma included punctured lungs, fractured ribs and cervical vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, spinal cord damage, and injury to the pericardium, the membrane around the heart. Dr. Oleski concluded that Colin would have survived for only a couple of minutes following the pericardial injury. When questioned by the defense about whether there was any sign of a broken arm, as Colin had claimed Bree tried to break it during the 911 call, Dr. Oleski said there were no injuries to support that claim. Next to testify was Eric Kuhn, Bree's brother. Eric described being on the phone with Bree the day she attempted suicide months earlier. She told him she had taken pills with alcohol. He claimed Colin hadn't responded with concern when informed. He didn't call for help, so Eric did. Eric added that Bree had long feared losing her children, believing Colin's family's financial advantage and legal resources gave them the upper hand. On the day of the shooting, he said Bree was anxious due to an unspecified surgery she had scheduled and was convinced Colin would exploit her recovery period to take the children. Eric testified that he spoke to his sister several times that day. Her mood fluctuated, sometimes calm, sometimes distressed. During a final call lasting around 45 minutes, he said he heard her arguing with Colin, heard shouting and objects being thrown. Then, he claimed, Bree picked up a gun. When asked how he knew this, Eric hesitated, then said he believed Bree had told him. Eric begged his sister to leave with the kids. He said she didn't listen. The last thing he heard before the call ended were Bree's words, "You're not going to take the kids." Then, gunshots, children crying, Bree's voice repeating, "Oh my God, I killed him. I have to call the police." Yet Eric's testimony faltered under cross-examination. He gave differing accounts from what he had originally told detectives in Pennsylvania, blaming inconsistencies on the claim that his first interview hadn't been recorded, something the detective firmly denied. With that, the prosecution rested. The defense, which had initially announced it would present testimony from a mental health expert and Bree herself to support a battered woman syndrome argument, abruptly changed course. Neither the expert nor Bree testified. No explanation was made public. Instead, the defense called James, Bree's ex-husband, who is also the biological father of her eldest daughter, Kaylee. James testified that on the day of the shooting, he exchanged texts with Colin. He also received a phone call from Bree, who told him directly, "You need to come get Kaylee." "I just shot Colin." When he asked why, she simply said, "I don't know." James rushed to retrieve his daughter. He told the court he had always believed Colin was a great stepfather. Kaylee had spoken highly of him. Due to a hurricane warning, the third day of trial was cut short. On Friday, September 27th, the court reconvened for closing arguments. The prosecution argued that Bree had no visible injuries on the day of the shooting and had deliberately provoked Colin while secretly recording the altercation with her phone and keeping her brother on the line. The prosecution concluded this was the true motive, not self-defense, but control. They said that when Bree couldn't provoke Colin into aggression, she took matters into her own hands, shooting him 4 times in the back, unaware that he was on the phone with 911. The defense countered that Colin had been walking around the home with a firearm and had hidden it in his truck before police first arrived. They pointed to the 911 call where Colin alleged Bree tried to break his arm, something not supported by the autopsy. One defense attorney even mocked Colin's 911 call, saying a Marine should have been able to get through a locked door, and insinuated that others in his elite unit would have laughed at his reaction. Finally, the defense claimed the shooting was the result of police failure to protect Bree after multiple pleas for help. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict.
Before sentencing, the judge allowed impact statements from Colin's parents. Colin's mother spoke first. She said she was grateful to have her grandchildren and hoped to adopt them officially. She condemned Bree not only for taking her son's life, but for trying to tarnish his reputation. Colin's father appeared even more affected. He said the children were doing well in school and were surrounded by love. He expressed disappointment in Bree's actions both before and after the shooting. Then, the judge issued Bree Coon's sentence. She was sentenced to life in prison. Though this might seem like the conclusion, the story continues. On October 3, 2024, Bree's legal team filed an appeal with the Florida Court of Appeals. They are challenging her conviction and requesting a new trial. Meanwhile, Bree was not subjected to disciplinary military action. She was discharged with a general discharge under honorable conditions after 17 years of service in the U.S. Navy. But for the children, no court ruling or appeal can undo what happened. Still, the questions remain. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was Bree acting in self-defense, as her lawyers claim? Or did Colin, a man with no prior convictions or history of violence, fall victim to a moment of irreversible fear and desperation?
Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.